All right, there are a couple of things here we're following, as the congressman was kind of pointing out, the type of initiatives they're looking at to get this spending under control. There are really three big efforts that are getting a lot of talk right now. I don't want to get too arcane or gobbledygook here. Suffice it to say, the Republican plan you're hearing a lot of talk about goes something like this: $462 billion in non-security spending. That's the portion of the budget they want to address, and they want to cut 22% of that. So not, as we thought earlier on today, all the spending, just that portion that would be considered non-security, which leaves out defense, which by and large leaves out some of the big old entitlements, at least up front. You take 22% off that, you're talking $84 to $90 billion per year in cuts. The president is proposing a 5-year freeze on such spending, and then separately a move to rein in defense spending by what would amount to $78 billion over 5 years. That would work out to about $15 billion a year. The biggest proposal on the table right now is one by Jim DeMint, the South Carolina Republican Tea Party favorite, has a $2.5 trillion cut in spending over the next 10 years. But even that, as big as it seems, would amount to $250 billion a year. Now, by comparison, that number, the biggest of all of those numbers, would barely keep pace with how much we are building in debt, interest on our national visa bill, if you will, to the tune of $4 billion a day. So you get an appreciation, looking at our nation's debt clock, how Herculean this battle has become. With me now, one of those who's going to be waging that fight. In fact, he's a rising star. He's a new star in this Congress. Everyone wants to know, what does Ben think? Ben Quayle, when he started running in Arizona for Congress, he was one of, a dozen guys running, right? Yeah. And he won, and everyone was shocked because he wasn't really given a chance to win, even though he has a pedigree name, and his dad was the Vice President of the United States, Dan Quayle. But Ben fooled them all and succeeded and triumphed where few thought he would. So, Congress, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you.
Now it's time to put the pedal to the metal, I guess.
Absolutely.
What do you think of these various proposals, Congressman?
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head, is that you see what's going on with non-defense discretionary spending, and that's just such a small piece of the pie. And if you look at the amount of debt that we're actually just going to service with interest, and that's with low interest rates right now.
Absolutely.
And that's the one thing that people do not understand, is that we have very low interest rates. And if those go back to historical levels, or even go back to scary thoughts, if they're back in the late 70s, early 80s, then that's going to really be hard to actually pay off those debts. It's going to be a big problem. So that's something we have to take care of and start talking about right now.
What is this new category, non-security spending?
Well, I think it's basically, it takes off the defense and homeland security. It takes those kind of out of that equation. But that's part of the piece of the puzzle that we have to start looking at to see where those cuts can be made.
But when we spend $600 billion on defense, surely there's got to be room for cuts or trimming there too, right?
I agree. I don't think there should be any sacred cow right now. I think we should be looking at the defense and seeing where we can actually be more efficient, because I think that, sometimes during the contracting process we lose some efficiencies in that regard. But we have to also make sure that one of the most important things that our government does is actually provide security for the rest of the population.
Congress, you and I talked about this when you were candidate running, and I've addressed this with so many others of both parties, that it's one thing to talk in the aggregate about cutting entitlements or reining them in, but as soon as you address them, who learned it better than President Bush from his own party when he wanted to rein in Social Security? They crucified him. So as soon as the issue comes up of even wanting to repeal health care or take bits of it away, I had Sheila Jackson Lee, a Democratic Congresswoman, on who said it was akin to murdering people. Others have said to try to rein in Social Security or Medicare is like throwing Grandma and Grandpa to the wolves. And on we go. And I'm not being too facetious. I mean, that's kind of the email and response you get from a lot of folks. So how are you going to deal with that when people talk in generality, trim, but just don't trim by me?
Yeah, that's a problem that we face. Even people who talk about cutting spending, and they go, well, that's not the spending that I was actually talking about that you're supposed to be cutting. But we have to be looking across the board. And in terms of entitlement reforms, we have to save them from themselves. Because if we don't reform Social Security and we don't reform Medicare, they're going to actually implode.
But Congressman, I'd say, it's like I talked to the Square Earth Society. They just don't see it. It's like this whole flat earth group that says Social Security's fine. I had Bernie Sanders, for whom I have a great deal of respect. He says it's absolutely fine, leave it alone, don't touch it. what do you do?
I mean, when the math's not there and the numbers aren't there, and if you look in the Social Security Trust Fund is filled with IOUs because the government's been pilfering it for years on end. We have to do something. We have to start having this discussion, and I would hope that we can have this in an adult fashion and stop demagoguing the issue anytime you talk about any substantive reforms that will actually save Social Security and save Medicare and save the system from imploding on itself.
Who are you sitting with tonight? That's the buzz around town. Who sits with who?
That's the number one question.
Isn't
I think I've been
amazing?
getting. It is.
Me, you know, I just think it's a dopey idea. I understand where it's coming from. I admire it, but I just think it's dopey.
I will be sitting with the rest of the Arizona delegation tonight.
Okay.
So that'll be
going to
nice.
leave it at that.
Yes, absolutely.
And you're such a wise man. You're not saying what I said. Congressman, thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
All right.